Just immediate family, my daughter said, when I asked what time I should come for Thanksgiving dinner. For a moment I thought I had misunderstood her. Immediate family, I repeated, yes, Mom. She replied quickly, it's going to be small this year. Just me, Mark. The kids and his parents, nothing personal. Nothing personal. Those two words stayed with me long after the call ended. I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at the Thanksgiving decorations I had placed around the house. A small ceramic turkey stood beside a bowl of apples. The dining room was already prepared, because I had assumed my daughter and grandchildren would visit me after dinner as they usually did. Every year I cooked something special for them. I made my daughter's favorite sweet potatoes, prepared the cranberry sauce my grandson loved, and always kept extra whipped cream because my granddaughter put it on everything. But this year I wasn't even invited. I told myself not to be hurt. My daughter had her own family now. She had responsibilities, traditions, and people to please. Maybe she truly wanted a quiet holiday. Still, I couldn't ignore one painful thought. If her husband's parents were invited, why wasn't I for the next 2 days? I tried to stay busy. I cleaned the house, folded laundry, and watched old movies. But every commercial showed families gathered around large tables, laughing and passing plates of food. The closer Thanksgiving came, the heavier my heart felt. On Wednesday evening, my daughter sent me a message. Hope you understand, we'll call you tomorrow. I stared at the screen for several minutes. Then I typed, of course. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I didn't tell her that I had already bought a turkey. I didn't tell her that I had spent nearly a week planning a meal for people who apparently had no place for me. And I definitely didn't tell her that I cried. After sending the message, Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and gray. I woke up early out of habit and walked into the kitchen. The turkey was still in the refrigerator. The ingredients were neatly arranged on the counter. For a while I considered cooking everything anyway. Maybe I could make the meal and eat it alone. But suddenly that idea felt too sad. I put on my coat and drove to the grocery store instead. I had no plan. I simply didn't want to stay inside the quiet house. The store was crowded with families buying last-minute food. People laughed as they pushed carts through the aisles. Children argued over desserts. Couples compared prices. I felt invisible among them. As I walked toward the bakery section, I noticed an older man standing beside a display of pumpkin pies. He looked confused. He picked up one pie, read the label, put it down, and then picked up another. After watching him for a moment, I asked, do you need help choosing? He looked surprised, then he smiled. I'm trying to find a pie that doesn't require me to pretend. I know how to cook, he said. I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed all week. He introduced himself as Walter. He was 74, a retired school teacher and a widower. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier. We talked beside the pies for almost 20 minutes. Eventually, he asked what I was cooking for Thanksgiving. I hesitated. Nothing. I said nothing. My daughter is having a small dinner. Just immediate family. Walter nodded slowly. I understand, he said. There was something in his voice that made me ask, are you spending Thanksgiving alone too? He looked down at the pie in his hands. My son invited me, he said. But they're traveling this year. He suggested I order food and watch football. I didn't know what to say. 2 strangers stood in a grocery store, both pretending they were fine. Then Walter held up the pumpkin pie and smiled. Would you like to have Thanksgiving with someone new? I stared at him. He quickly added, not as a date. I'm too old to survive modern dating. That made me laugh again. I meant we could share a meal. 2 lonely people are still better than one lonely person. His words stayed with me. I thought about my empty house. I thought about the turkey in my refrigerator. Then I said I have enough food for 10 people. Walter raised an eyebrow. Are you inviting me? Yes, I replied. But you have to bring the pie. He smiled. Deal. When I returned home, something had changed. The house no longer felt empty. I began cooking. Walter arrived at noon carrying 2 pumpkin pies instead of 1. I didn't know which brand was better, he explained, so I bought both. He also brought flowers. They were on sale. He said, I placed them in a glass vase and set them in the center of the table. For the first time that week, I felt excited. We cooked together, although Walter admitted he could barely boil water. He peeled potatoes while I prepared the turkey. He told stories about teaching history to teenagers. I told him about raising my daughter alone after my husband died. We laughed when he accidentally dropped an entire spoonful of salt into the mashed potatoes. We threw those potatoes away and started again. By the time dinner was ready, the kitchen looked like a disaster. But the house was full of warmth. We sat across from each other at the dining table. Before eating, Walter asked if he could say something today. He began, I thought I had been forgotten. But maybe being left out gave me the chance to meet someone who understood. My eyes filled with tears. I reached across the table and held his hand. Maybe family isn't always about who invites you. I said maybe it's about who makes room for you. We ate slowly and talked for hours. At 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was my daughter. Happy Thanksgiving, Mom. She said cheerfully, we're all here. In the background, I could hear people laughing. Happy Thanksgiving, I replied. What are you doing? I'm having dinner alone. I looked at Walter, who was eating his second piece of pie. No, I said. I'm spending it with someone new. There was silence. Someone new. My daughter asked, yes. His name is Walter. We met at the grocery store. Another pause, then she said, Mom, you invited a stranger into your house. He isn't a stranger anymore. She sounded uncomfortable. Well, I hope you're being careful. I said. And I hope you're enjoying your immediate family dinner. My words were calm, but she understood what I meant. The call ended shortly afterward. For the rest of the evening, Walter and I watched an old movie. He washed the dishes even though I told him not to. Before leaving, he stood near the front door and said, Thank you for giving me a real Thanksgiving. I smiled. Thank you for reminding me that I still deserve one. The next morning, I woke up to several messages from my daughter. The first said, I'm sorry. The second said, I didn't realize how much it hurt you. The third said, can we talk? I didn't answer immediately. I made coffee and looked out the window. For years, I had believed that being a good mother meant accepting every disappointment quietly. I thought love required me to understand everything, forgive everything, and never ask for anything in return. But Thanksgiving had taught me something different. Love should not require someone to make themselves invisible. Later that afternoon, I called my daughter. She cried. She explained that her husband wanted a small holiday with his parents, and that she had agreed without thinking about how it would affect me. I thought you would understand. She said I did understand. I replied, but understanding doesn't mean it didn't hurt. She apologized again. Then she asked if I would come for Christmas. I told her I would think about it, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I wanted her to understand that my presence was not something she could dismiss and then expect whenever it was convenient. A week later, Walter called. He asked if I wanted to have coffee. I said yes. Coffee became lunch. Lunch became walks through the park, and slowly a friendship grew. We were not trying to replace anyone. We were simply two people who had discovered that life could still bring unexpected kindness. Months later, my daughter invited Walter and me to dinner. She greeted him warmly and thanked him for being there when I needed someone. Walter smiled and said, your mother did more for me than you know. That night, as I drove home, I thought about Thanksgiving. I had expected to spend the holiday crying alone. Instead, I found a friend. I learned that being excluded does not mean you have no value. Sometimes the people who fail to make room for us accidentally push us toward new doors. And behind those doors may be someone who sees us, appreciates us, and reminds us that we are never too old to begin again. My daughter had said just immediate family, so I spent Thanksgiving with someone new. And somehow, that stranger became part of the family I never knew I needed.